I was running on fumes. This week had been our company's biggest fundraiser of the year, and as one of the coordinators, I was buried in logistics, last-minute cancellations, guest lists, budget spreadsheets, everything. I barely slept. Every morning I was up before sunrise, and every night I collapsed into bed with my phone still buzzing in my hand. By the time the actual event happened, I was so tense I could barely breathe. And even after it was over, there wasn't relief. Just debriefs, cleanups, reports, and team meetings to wrap things up. So when my birthday rolled around just a few days later, I didn't even have the energy to think about celebrating. Honestly, I just wanted to survive the day. That morning I told myself I'd power through the meeting and then crash when I got home. I wasn't expecting anything. No gifts, no balloons. I had let go of that kind of thing years ago, after too many quiet birthdays where I was the one baking my own cake, so the kids wouldn't miss out. But during that final team meeting, something unexpected happened. My co-workers, my overworked, just as exhausted co-workers, surprised me. In the middle of our wrap-up, they dimmed the lights and brought out a box of cupcakes. Not the cheap grocery store kind, with sickly sweet icing. These were boutique cupcakes, like tiny edible sculptures. Lavender honey, salted caramel, raspberry cheesecake. My eyes actually welled up. We all shared a few, and when the meeting ended, they packed up the 3 extras for me to take home. "You deserve it," my manager said, smiling. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't felt seen like that in a long time. I held that little box like it was treasure. All I could think on the drive home was how I was going to sit on the couch, take off my shoes, and savor one of those cupcakes in silence. Just one thing for me, for once. But when I walked through the door, that peaceful image evaporated. As I stepped inside, the smell of overly sweet frosting hit me first. Daniel, my husband, was in the kitchen, hunched over a plastic cake container. He looked up, grinned, and said, "Surprise." He was poking little candles into a grocery store birthday cake, the kind with neon-colored icing and a thick crust of sugar pearls that crack your teeth. He must have run to the store last minute. The label was still on the side of the box. They'd used gel to write my name across the top, slightly smudged. It was crooked. The cake wasn't even my favorite flavor. I think it was vanilla with artificially flavored strawberry filling. But I smiled, thanked him, and acted touched. I've learned to manage my reactions. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. Still, I couldn't help but compare it to the cupcakes in my hand, nestled delicately in their bakery box, each one a miniature masterpiece. He didn't even notice them at first. He was too busy lighting the candles and calling for the kids to come sing. I placed the cupcakes gently on the counter, out of the way, like they were too precious to share space with that cake. Then, without much warning, he told me he couldn't stay long. His son from a previous relationship had a big soccer game, and he was leaving in 30 minutes. My heart sank. Of course I said it was fine. Of course I understood. I always do. So instead of having dinner together, he rushed off and I took my kids, my 2, not his, to a small restaurant nearby. We ordered fries, milkshakes, and whatever dessert they had on the menu. I told myself it was enough. I was used to making things special, even when they weren't. Back home, we lit the candles on the store cake and took a few bites. The kids tried to be enthusiastic, but we barely ate a quarter of it. It was dry, dense. The frosting left a weird aftertaste. Still, I kept smiling. It was fine. It had to be fine. Daniel came home later just as I was climbing into bed. Daniel walked into the bedroom as I was pulling the covers over me. His hair was still damp with sweat, and he looked pleased with himself. He leaned against the doorway and asked, "So, how was the cake?" I hesitated for a second. I could have lied. I could have said it was great and moved on, but after the week I'd had, I was too tired to pretend. "It was dry," I said honestly. "Kind of bland, to be honest." His smile faded slightly. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly and muttered, Then he turned off the hallway light and disappeared into the kitchen. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes. I wasn't trying to hurt his feelings, I was just being honest. I didn't ask for the cake, I didn't expect it. And he hadn't even asked what kind I liked. It felt like a gesture for the sake of saying he did something, not because he thought about me. The house was quiet after that. I heard him shuffle around the living room for a bit, probably watching highlights from the game. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling, wondering why even the smallest expectations felt like too much. I thought about the cupcakes. I still hadn't eaten one. Just knowing they were there waiting for me was comforting, like a little promise of something I could look forward to, something that hadn't been rushed or bought out of guilt, something chosen. That night I fell asleep with the faint hope that the next day would feel a little better. Maybe I'd finally get a minute to sit down, breathe, and savor one of those cupcakes in peace. That hope didn't last long. The next day felt like a reset. Work was calmer, the chaos had died down, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't dreading walking into the house. The thought of those cupcakes had been my motivation all day. Just one, just sitting in silence with a perfect little treat, felt like a tiny slice of control in a life that often didn't feel like mine. I walked through the door and dropped my bag. My eyes immediately went to the kitchen counter. The box was gone. At first, I thought maybe one of the kids had moved it, or maybe Daniel put it in the fridge to keep it fresh. I opened the fridge. Nothing. I checked the pantry, even the microwave. Nothing. My heart sank. I walked into the living room where Daniel was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Did you see the cupcakes that were on the counter?" He didn't even look up. "Yeah, I ate them." I stood still, trying to process what he'd just said. "All of them?" He looked at me like I was being dramatic. "Yeah, they were just sitting there. I figured you weren't going to eat them." I didn't say anything for a moment. I felt this rush of disbelief, followed by a strange, sharp kind of sadness. "Daniel, those were for my birthday. My coworkers gave them to me. They were special." He shrugged. "You didn't say anything about them." I stared at him. "I shouldn't have to. Why would you think it's okay to eat all of them without even asking?" He frowned, clearly annoyed now. "I got you a cake. You didn't say what kind of cake you wanted. I tried. You didn't seem happy about it anyway." And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just the cupcakes. It was the constant, exhausting need to plan everything, explain everything, manage every detail, even my own birthday. I felt my voice rising before I could stop it. Why is it always on me to say exactly what I want? Why do I have to manage every detail, even on my birthday? Daniel sat up straighter on the couch. "I'm not a mind reader, okay? You could have just told me." I shook my head. "You didn't ask. You didn't even think to ask. You just assumed it didn't matter." He scoffed. "It's cupcakes. You're really this upset over cupcakes?" "No," I snapped. "I'm upset because I'm tired. I'm tired of being the one who has to anticipate everything, organize everything, smile through everything. I've had the worst week in months, and the one thing I was saving for myself, one small thing, you took without a second thought." He threw his hands up. "Jesus, I said I got you a cake. I even got candles. I was trying." "You ran out and bought the cheapest cake at the grocery store," I said, the words sharper than I meant. "You didn't ask what I liked. You didn't even stay to eat it with us. You went to your son's game." He blinked as if I'd crossed a line. "So now it's a problem that I support my kid?" "That's not what I said." "Yes, it is." We stared at each other, the air thick with resentment, and words we weren't brave enough to say. I could feel my throat tighten, but I held it back. I wouldn't cry in front of him over 3 cupcakes. "I'm not mad about the cupcakes," I finally said, quieter this time. "I'm mad that you never really think about me unless I tell you to." He didn't respond, just looked away, jaw tense, like he was waiting for me to calm down so we could move on, like always. But I didn't want to move on this time. I went to bed alone that night, and even though he was just one room away, I felt completely invisible. The next morning, the silence between us was louder than any argument we could have had. He got up before me, left without saying much. No good morning, no "I'm sorry." Just the sound of the front door closing and the hum of his car pulling away. I walked into the kitchen, half hoping I'd imagined it all, that maybe one of the cupcakes had somehow survived, tucked behind something. I opened every cabinet, even checked the trash, like a lunatic. All I found was the empty box, flattened and tossed carelessly on top of some junk mail. I stared at it for a full minute, then closed the lid on the trash can. My stomach felt tight. The rest of the morning was a blur. I made breakfast for the kids, answered a few work emails, but everything felt muted, dull. That box of cupcakes had become a symbol, and now it was gone. And I didn't know how to explain why that hurt so much without sounding ridiculous. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, he came home. We barely spoke. I sat on the couch, flipping through shows I wasn't watching. He sat in the recliner, staring at his phone. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. At one point he said, "Are we really still doing this?" I didn't look at him. Doing what? This, acting like I committed some huge crime over dessert. My jaw clenched. I turned the volume up slightly. "It's not about dessert." He exhaled loudly, stood up and disappeared into the bedroom. And that was it? The cake he'd bought? Still sitting in the fridge, barely touched. Every time I opened the door, it stared back at me like a reminder of how little he really knew me. It wasn't just about the cupcakes, it was about being thought of, being seen, being worth the kind of effort he gave to other people without question. But for me, I had to beg for crumbs. The next morning, something shifted. I was halfway through making breakfast when Daniel came into the kitchen holding a small white box. I didn't recognize it at first, until he set it on the counter and opened it. 4 cupcakes, the exact same kind my co-workers had given me. Same bakery, same intricate frosting swirls. He must have gone back and bought them. "They're for you," he said quietly. "All of them." I looked at the box, then at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I messed up, and I'm sorry." I didn't say anything right away. He reached into his jacket and handed me a card. Inside there was a short message in his handwriting. "I know I got it wrong. I'm trying." And that hit me in a weird way. He wasn't a monster. He'd tried, clumsily, late, and only after I got upset. But this gesture wasn't nothing. It just wasn't enough to erase how small I'd felt the last few days. "I appreciate it," I said finally, and I meant it. I picked up one of the cupcakes, salted caramel my favorite, and took a bite. It was perfect. Sweet, dense, just enough crunch on top. But the taste was different now. Not because of the cupcake, but because of the context. Because now it felt like a peace offering after a battle that shouldn't have happened in the first place. He hovered for a second, then added, "That gift I mentioned on your birthday, it's arriving today. I had to rush the shipping." I looked up at him. "What is it?" He smiled a little. "You'll see, it's nice. I think you'll like it." I nodded and said nothing more. I didn't want to get my hopes up, because when you spend enough time feeling like an afterthought, even the most beautiful gesture can start to feel like a patch on a hole that keeps reopening. By the afternoon, the package had arrived, a medium-sized box addressed to me sitting on the porch. I brought it inside, set it on the dining table, and stared at it for a minute. Daniel stood nearby, watching my reaction like a kid waiting to see if his present was good enough. I opened it. Inside was a leather handbag. Expensive looking, probably something he found online after Googling gifts for wife. It was nice. Not really my style, not something I'd ever pick out for myself, but undeniably thoughtful in a very surface-level way. He was beaming. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded. "It's beautiful." It was, but I felt numb. The whole thing felt more like damage control than real care. He meant well, I didn't doubt that. But this wasn't about handbags or cupcakes. It was about never being considered in the first place. We sat down to dinner. The kids were chatty, light-hearted. Daniel tried to join in to laugh at their jokes, to act normal. I played along, smiled when expected. But I couldn't shake the feeling of imbalance, how much emotional labor I'd done just to feel halfway seen. Later that night, he came up behind me while I was brushing my teeth and wrapped his arms around my waist. "I'm really sorry," he said again, softly. "For everything." I nodded, toothbrush still in my mouth, eyes on my reflection. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding ungrateful. I didn't want more gifts. I wanted him to notice me when I didn't say a word. I wanted to be the person he planned for, not just the one he apologized to afterward. I went to bed thinking about that. About how low my expectations had sunk, how I'd stopped hoping for real consideration and started settling for late apologies and after-the-fact fixes. Still, I appreciated the effort. I really did. But I couldn't help but ask myself, was I the problem for feeling like it wasn't enough? The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. I padded into the kitchen in my slippers, opened the box of cupcakes, and picked the one with lavender frosting. It was the prettiest of the bunch, and I hadn't touched it yet. I sat at the table alone and took a slow bite. It was perfect, just as rich and delicate as the ones from my coworkers. But the moment was quieter this time. There wasn't excitement or anticipation, just a strange mix of relief and resignation. I finally had what I wanted, but not the way I'd wanted it. Daniel came in a little while later, looking hopeful. He poured coffee for both of us and set mine gently in front of me like a peace offering. "Feeling any better?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." And that was true in a way. Things were calmer. He was trying. He had apologized, more than once. He had replaced the cupcakes. He had brought me a card, a gift, made gestures that looked like love. Maybe they even were. But something inside me was still unsettled, because I couldn't forget how invisible I'd felt in the days leading up to this. How casually he'd eaten something that wasn't his. How easily he'd dismissed my hurt. How quick he was to get angry at me for being upset, instead of recognizing why I felt that way. He tried to hold my hand across the table. I let him. We sat like that for a while in that quiet in-between space where you're not really mad anymore, but you're not fully okay either. That afternoon, I went about my day like normal. Folded laundry, took the kids to the park, responded to emails. From the outside, it probably looked like a good day, but inside I kept circling back to the same question. Am I the one overreacting? Was I wrong for expecting more, for being hurt over something so small? Or am I just tired of feeling like I have to ask for the bare minimum? I think what gets to me most isn't the cupcakes or the cake or even the gift. It's that I had to explain why I was hurt. I didn't want grand gestures. I didn't want him to spend a fortune or pull off some elaborate surprise. I just wanted to feel like he knew me, like he thought about me on a day that was supposed to be mine. Instead, I got a last-minute cake from the discount fridge. I got brushed off for a soccer game. I got my one small joy, those cupcakes, taken without a second thought. And when I said something, I got told I never said they were important. Do I really have to spell out that something meant for me, gifted to me on my birthday, shouldn't be eaten by someone else without asking? I guess what I wanted was effort, not to be put on a pedestal, just considered, planned for. A moment where I wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mum or someone's co-worker, just me, seen, heard, valued. And when I didn't get that, I felt stupid for expecting it. Daniel did apologize. He got me more cupcakes. He bought a gift. He's been more attentive. But why did it take a confrontation for that to happen? Why do I feel like I have to explode just to be noticed? And I keep going back to this. If I hadn't said anything, if I had just smiled and swallowed it all, would he have even realized? That's what lingers. It wasn't about dessert. It was about the feeling that without prompting, I might not even register as a priority. So now I turn it over to you. Was I overreacting? Was I wrong to expect more on my own birthday? Should I have just let it go, eaten the dry cake and smiled through it all? Or is it okay to want to feel special, even just once a year?